Hey there, risers and thrivers, and welcome back to episode 6 of On the Up and Up. If you're a returning listener, thank you for joining me again. And if this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. My name is Janine Heinrich, and I am the creator and host of On the Up and Up, which was created to encourage critical conversations, amplify the untold stories and achievements of the underrepresented and underestimated, and inspire aspiring founders to start their journeys. The core pillars are representation, conversation, and education, and this episode's guest is sharing a ton of knowledge. So make sure you have your pen and papers ready. And with that being said, I'd like to say, first of all, thank you to today's guest, and I'd like to introduce you all to Richy Ugwu, who is the founder and CEO of Unea and the 2023 Google Black Founder Fund recipient. In addition to that, he is a serial entrepreneur, business angel, and mentor who has successfully scaled businesses to over 100 million euros in gross merchandise value and raised over 20 million in funding from VCs, corporates, and business angels. Now, I don't want to take the floor away from this amazing guest, so I'm going to hand it to you, Richy. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Richy. Been an entrepreneur for the last 10 years. Built different types of ventures, corporate ventures, venture-backed startups, bootstrapped a business in different industries, so in data, in media, deep tech venture, consumer play. So I've seen B2B, B2C, different challenges over the last year. Before I started my entrepreneur journey, I started at City Deal Groupon. Seems like ages ago. When they IPO'd around the time. Worked in consulting for a couple of years. Studied in Heidelberg, St. Gallen, Switzerland, in Paris, HEC Economics.
Cool.
So that was the starting point for everything. And maybe relevant for your audience, what I like to do a lot is to help young entrepreneurs on their journey. So over the last year, help 150 plus startups in some form capacity, mainly through kind of mentor programs, in different accelerator programs, or in jury formats for pitch competition and so forth. So always happy to kind of share learnings, at least from my journey, if that's relevant. Well, that's excited to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. And I mean, I love that you are also giving back the knowledge to the community and not holding it completely to yourself. I don't know how you managed to mentor 150 founders.
A lot of years.
Years, but it's amazing that you are giving back. And I kind of also always ask people this question, but you've been in the entrepreneurship scene for quite some time now. Did you always want to be an entrepreneur? Did you know that this was the path you were going to go on?
Well, not really. So when I was born and raised in Berlin, in Kreuzberg actually, so not far in Urban Krankenhaus, not far from here. Yeah. So it was not very clear for me what the path is back then. So I kind of stumbled into this path. Quickly realized that I had always like my own ideas of how to do things, which is not ideal in a corporate setting, let's put it this way.
No, it's not.
And back then it was like the start of like Rocket Internet, as mentioned, City Deal. It's like it feels like comparable to this time with Gorillas. Like everyone was working at Gorillas, and back then it was like Groupon was the hot shit, and everyone was there. And this kind of everyone wanted to start something, and that was also what sparked, I think, the interest on my side. So that was kind of somehow led the way for the first venture. And then, been building businesses ever since.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's awesome. And also at the same time, you said that you did corporate venturing, you did traditional venturing, you've also bootstrapped a company as well. For people who don't actually know what corporate venturing is, could you explain that a little bit, but then also a bit of your entrepreneurial journey in all three of those areas?
Sure. So how I differentiate those is like, so you can bootstrap a business. I think that's clear without like external kind of funding, or maybe you can have some debt funding, but not in a professionalized way. Then venture back to either VCs or business angels. So what people consider the normal way of building startups, at least in Berlin, right? So not so normal actually, but very specific type of business.
Exactly.
And then corporate venture also something I just stumbled into is to build ventures, to build startups for larger corporations. So I built 2 corporate ventures.
Nice.
I built one for Intersport just recently. So Intersport's the leading sports retailer in Europe, and I built a marketing service business for them.
Cool.
And the other corporate venture is a joint venture for Metro, the wholesale company, and Media Saturn, the consumer electronics retailer, and build a data monetization venture, both here in Berlin. So it's a very different process, as you have very different type of investors, right?
Yeah.
So you have publicly listed or very large multi-billion-dollar organizations as your shareholders, as your investors. They expect you to build a company very differently, right?
Yes.
So they have less risk appetite. They want to see profitability faster, a clearer path to profitability, not like growth. Although this has also changed in venture over the last months and years. But yeah, so it's the way you build a venture is very different, and the leverage you kind of have is very different, right? So if you build a venture for, I don't know, Metro, $40 billion company, on launch day, every publication will write about you, right?
Yeah.
Because that's very interesting. So also how you maneuver, how you steer the company is very different, because you focus more on compliance, on legal issues, right? So if you make mistakes, that's not ideal. Let's put it this way. So yeah, it's just very different type of building a venture.
1000%.
Based from the cap table that you have, right? So I think that's also true in venture space. So if you start with business angel, they expect different things than professional VCs coming in and then late stage funds. So you always kind of transition with that phase.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that's also a really critical point, because you said it's very specific to the type of business that you have. And it's very, very true. And I think sometimes, especially in this Berlin bubble specifically, I mean, this is the one that I know. I don't know what's going on in the rest of the world. But in the Berlin bubble, I think a lot of people are like, okay, I'm going to go raise VC money. I'm going to go do this. And it's like, wait a second, but are you a VC case? Like, and they oftentimes will run into issues and then feel like, oh, it's because of this or it's because of that. And at the end of the day, it could just be the nature of your business not really fitting to what they're looking for. So I completely agree with that. And I also work in corporate venturing. That's my day job. And that's a whole different nature of the types of businesses. I was also going to say, I think for my past companies, you always want to see an exit within like 4 to 5 years, right? So there's only certain types of businesses you can really build that you know can get to profitability within that period of time. It's a different nature to the type of business.
100%. And it's also a question if that's really something you want to aspire to. I mean, obviously, can be stressful and so forth, but building other types of business is also stressful. But I think what's more relevant is the VC case is really an outlier case, right? So if you look at the different kinds of teams that started raising VC money, there are not too many that are now like have the big exit, obviously, right? So that's something where the question is, to build like a more traditional business model, is that even something where kind of your expected return is much higher, right? So to build a $20 million company, it's amazing for you personally, but a VC will not care, right? So, and maybe the likelihood to build this is 10-15% likelihood to build a VC case, where maybe after the exit you get the same reward, is 1% or less, right? So that's also always something to think about. Always seems like cool, VC case, and then and TechCrunch and so forth. But it's about like what actually do you want to do, and maybe that's part of your journey, and you want to just experience how it is to like do fundraising all the time and so forth. But what often second-time founders, third-time founders do, they try to avoid VC money as long as possible, right? And just build a sustainable company. Yeah,
fair enough. I mean, that makes a lot of sense as well, especially with the aspirations behind it. I do think it depends on what you really want at the end of the day. And I kind of goes me back to your journey in a way. What prompted you to go more? Because you've had multiple ventures. So how did you decide to go into creating a VC business? Was it intentionally, or was it more the type of business you stumbled upon in the nature?
So both kind of there. So I wanted to build a software business based on the learnings from the last ventures. I identified a problem because both corporate ventures actually were in the retail commerce space. So our like Gunea I'm building now is a software play, SaaS enabled marketplace. So that's normally very VC territory.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way, because you need a lot of upfront capital to build the software, build the tech, and so forth. And that was like the first time, really, me as a also CEO, building a venture case. So I said, okay, that's something I want to do and see how that works, and if I can build a VC case. So that was kind of something I wanted to do, and the business model was perfect for that.
Okay. Could you actually explain what is a venture case?
I think,
if you don't mind.
I think for me, so and the definition I think now changes a bit with the size of the funds, but normally what you want to see as a VC is to invest in companies that can return your fund, right? So if you have billion-dollar exits, or you need to have a business that can generate billion-dollar exit, right? So because I don't know, if you VC early stage, you invest in a company, a couple million for 10, 15, 20%, you dilute over time. At exit case, you maybe hold 5% of the company. So to have a fund returner, that's how they call it. So if you have a 300 million fund, this 5% needs to generate 300 million, right? So
no pressure.
That's exactly right. Because their business model is in a way that they know most of the ventures they invest in will fail, right? So they need those outliers. They need those big exits to return the fund. And that's not possible in most cases, right? So to build a business that will have an exit value of 1 billion, 5 billion, whatever, that's not in most business models. But I mean, again, it's super fine to build it. Everyone would be very happy to have a $20 million business.
1,000%. Right? I'd be very content with that.
And so I think that's very hard to do. Yeah. And it's a long journey, and might not be the best journey, but obviously it's something where people are very interested if a lot of millions go into one venture.
For sure. It is a long journey. I think I've said this pretty much on every episode. Entrepreneurship is a lifestyle. Yeah. I think a lot of people will say, oh yeah, this is my career choice. I'm like, no, that's a life. Yeah. Because there's certain things you're going to sacrifice along the way. It defines what you can and cannot do, where you can and cannot be. It has a huge impact on everything. So, but even before we jump into that impact of it much later on down the line, thinking back to like your early ventures, one of the first one that you had was bootstrapped, right? How did you stumble upon that idea?
The bootstrap one was a consumer business just on the side, because my main businesses were always kind of selling PowerPoint slides.
Gotcha.
Because like selling software or tech or whatever data, that's nothing tangible. And I wanted to have something that's actually tangible product. So we built a malt beer business, non-alcoholic malt beer business, and we bootstrapped that. So on the side. Again, very different experience, also how you manage and steer this entire endeavor. My first venture was also an angel-backed, VC-backed thing, but I was not the CEO at this time. So I was part of the founding team, but not the CEO. So
okay, gotcha. It sounds like you do a lot of this out of curiosity.
Yeah, true, 100%.
Yeah.
So
like it's a genuine curiosity to learn how to do these things.
Exactly.
And I think the saying goes like curiosity kills the cat. Curiosity it's a challenging thing, right? You're going to make a lot of mistakes. So actually, what were some of the early mistakes that you would say that you made that now you look back, you're like, oh, that could have easily been avoidable?
In building the company? I think the biggest mistake, or a couple of mistakes, obviously a lot of mistakes over the time. So yes, as you just said, I think that's already the first mistake. In the beginning of my career, I did a lot of career choices, let's put it this way, out of curiosity, right? Yeah. So now I would think about building a next venture much more strategically, right? And like take months to think about, is that actually something I want to do? I think that's something early entrepreneurs do not have. Yeah. They do not really, and that's also what I see when I talk to young founders or founding teams. They do not really challenge their business model, right? So, for example, what I try to do with Unea is I talk to hundreds of people and ask them to kind of find mistakes in this business model. So why would it not work? Was 10 times more relevant than, do you think that's a great idea? Yeah, I think it's a great idea. So what, right? So, but then if you started building a business just because you think it's a great idea, having said, so for the venture case, right? So if you need external funding, if you just build something on your own, fine, right? You don't need external people to also think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
But in the venture space, you need investors to also believe that's a great idea, and that you need for the next years, right? So I always try, and I recommend teams to find mistakes and problems and pain points in their idea, in the business model that they want to pursue. And maybe you can resolve them, maybe you cannot. And if you can't, maybe you choose something else, right?
Yeah.
Because if you find out, okay, this pain point I cannot solve in year 3, maybe that's not the ideal path, right? So if you said, okay, there's another business model that seems more attractive, that gets better feedback, then the likelihood of that also being a better business is just so much higher, right?
Yeah.
So, and when I started also testing different ideas, I always talk to investors to get also their sense of, because they see a lot of stuff, right? I mean, that's their job. So they can quickly gaps. Okay, these could be pain points, that could be challenging, and go to market and product and all of the different things. So I think that's super valuable, right?
Yeah, most definitely.
And it's, I think to detach yourself from the idea and not make it personal and really find the mistakes and try to solve them if that's possible.
Yeah. How does one detach themselves from the idea, though? Sorry, not to interrupt, because I see this a lot with founders where they are so attached. And I brought this up with another founder I did an interview with as well. He said, well, he still holds on to the original idea that he has. He just realized that it maybe will take 15 steps for it to get there instead of 2. So he's got to pivot a lot more along the way. Yeah. So that's how he set his mindset for it. But how do you, or how would you suggest people detach themselves and not take it so personally and actually look for the criticism? Yeah.
I think there are 2 types, right? Yeah. So one type is ideas and founders where this is like really personal to them. Yeah. So they're really passionate about the problem. Then I think that's something else. But that's also rare cases, right? Okay. Normally that's not the case that you like extremely, because something personal happened to you or whatever in your family, you want to build this and you just so passionate about this problem. Happens, great, then there's a great founder market fit, right? Yeah. But in most cases, it's more the second where, as you mentioned, it's more like a lifestyle and they just want to have this idea and start it, and they there's a founding team they met in factory and they just want to go with that because they think it's a great idea and they think getting feedback is negative feedback will not really help them, right? And say, but it's just the naysayers. They don't know and they have no idea, and we will find a way, right? I think that's very dangerous. I think especially investors have great feedback, and you also realize in your fundraising, and that's also what I did in Unea. I fundraise on PowerPoint, to just see, does that work? Will they give me money for the idea? Because if you see that's a great idea and other people also think that's a great idea, you can get millions based on PowerPoint, right? So because that's just the likelihood that this is a great idea increases so much. And again, for the venture case, you need those investors and you want to build something that has a high likelihood of success. So why not challenge the idea until you tweaked it? Maybe you can also tweak it in a way where say, okay, seems like now everyone thinks that's a great idea, so maybe let's go for it. Yeah,
actually, because you said like just raising off of a PowerPoint, I think that's one of the things where I've got so many questions around that, because I talk to a lot of founders and when they do go to investors, oftentimes the investor will say, well, come back when you've got a product or come back when you can show traction. And so they're oftentimes expecting to actually see some kind of a business in place. So how is it possible, or how was it possible for you just going there with a PowerPoint?
Yeah, but maybe because also not too interesting at this moment, right? Okay. So an investor has no incentive to say no. Okay. Right? So if I go to an investor today and he says, maybe come back in 6 months and show me the product and show me the MVP and show me your co-founder or show me whatever, then what they're doing is just de-risking their investment decisions, right? So maybe in the next 7 or 6 months, you actually have a great product. Yeah. So I, as an investor, would be stupid to say no if you come back to me and you have something amazing with great traction, so maybe then I want to invest.
So they're buying time in a little bit of
they were just buying. They have nothing to lose, right? So why would I say no, right? Maybe you come back in 24 months and another investor has invested and you pivoted completely and building something now that's amazing and I want to invest. So that's really dangerous, right? So an investor has no incentive to say no to you. Okay. So you need to really be careful with the feedback, especially this kind of too early feedback, or I would like to see ABC. So when I did the fundraising, for example, for NEA, especially early days with business angels and early stage pre-seed funds, I mean, really takes 1, max 2 calls and they make the decision if they want to invest, right?
So it's not 5-6 calls and okay.
No. If you have 5-6 calls early stage, then they will not invest.
Fair. Okay.
And then often what I see with people with consulting background, that they really try to convince the other side. From my experience, that will never work, right? So it's not about convincing them that this is a great idea. And maybe you convince one, but that's not how investing should work, right? Is the investor should be convinced that this is a great idea from the get-go and they should be excited about it and help you then fundraise, right? I think in general, to your earlier question, one mistake is to not think from an investor perspective, because you also invest time, effort, sweat, and tears in your company, to think the same way and work, kind of do the business engineering and venture building, and how can I now build this more strategically structured into a successful venture is something that's very helpful.
Maybe just like another question to it, because I agree with a lot of the points that you're saying. I actually sat through a workshop with David Cohen, one of the founders of Techstars. And one of the things he also said was like, don't waste your time. If it's taken more than 1 or 2 calls, they're not going to do it. And also try to lock them in early. So it's about the language that you use when you're talking to the investor, where it's saying, hey, would you commit today? I'm not holding you to it, to XYZ amount sometime down the line when I'm ready to raise. That's all. And that's like the most direct question that you'd ask, and that's the times you'll get the most real answer from them. And that's where you stop them from stalling and buying time, like you said, to de-risk the potential investment. But I wanted to go back to NEA a little bit, because I mean, it's not your first venture either. So do you think that also played a role into? Okay.
Sure, it's easier, right? So again, maybe a couple of points on this de-risking. And I think your job as a founder, especially in venture back, but also just for yourself, how I think I always recommend founders to look at it, is you're in the business of risk mitigation, right? So you have a lot of risks in the beginning. You have a team risk, right? So an investor would ask, are you the right person, or is this team just the right team to build this? Can they hire a great executive team and lead this team and motivate this team? That's not clear, right? They have some data points, they have a couple calls with you, but there's this risk. There's a risk, product risk, right? If you build a software company, are you able to build a great software company or a software product? Is that possible? Will you manage to get this on the ground? Then there's go-to-market risk, right? So are you actually possible to sell that product or service, right? So either through sales, motion, marketing, motion, product, whatever. So there are hundreds of risks. So, and you have them as an entrepreneur no matter what, right? So, but from an investor perspective, I think, okay, I have all of this risk. So what I would like to see is how, as a founding team, can I define milestones that are associated to the different risks and mitigate this risk, de-risk my business, right? So to say, okay, at the beginning, there's all of the risks. You ask a lot from an investor, right? So
it's like, just believe in me and an idea.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So the next thing obviously would be, I need to mitigate this team risk, right? So I cannot build it myself. Am I able to build a team that will do that, so that risk can be mitigated? That's an amazing milestone to do. Then maybe you have people from your past that invested will invest into you, and then you mitigate this team risk. You have maybe a founding team or a team underneath, and then assess risks. Maybe then it's another tranche of investors that are likely to invest. And then product, you have an MVP, so you're de-risking a version 1, your first pilots, right? So it's always about how can I de-risk certain aspects of my business. And if you think about this way, you have a very clear path and structure how you need to manage your company, right? So you need to look at all the different risks, why this could fail, and how can I now create a milestone, one single milestone to de-risk all of the, or one risk at a time, right?
Yeah. So really looking at it from an investor's perspective of where they would see all of the risks potentially in the business that you have, and just be realistic about these are the challenges that I'm most likely going to face, and these are the areas where they see a potential risk. What can I do to mitigate that for them? Essentially. And that's a really interesting point. And I think it also leads me to the other thing, because we had a conversation in the past, and this sticks to my mind today, and I said this to you before, where you were saying 80% of what founders do is pretty much irrelevant. It's really the 20% that they should be focusing on. So what should a founder really be focusing on then? Of course, mitigating your risk, right?
But that's already the answer. So there's no, don't do A, but do B. That's not, I think, the point, but it's, especially in this phase from 0 to 1, the founding teams do not have a clear idea what to focus on, right? Which is natural because you don't know what's the path that will bring this company, make this company successful, right? So, but focusing on those risks and those milestones that are associated to that I think is the core focus. So you can do a lot of things, and you need to do a lot of things, but what if you have this venture route, what you need to focus on, what's the next single milestone I can prove and show that de-risk my business. That's the only thing you should focus on, right? So if you're very early, you need to de-risk team. If you come back after 6 months, 12 months to investor, and you adjust yourself and you build everything, that's not really helpful, right? So then it's still a question, but are you able to hire a team and convince people to join you? Because you cannot do that forever, right? So great that you built this on yourself, but how do you de-risk this problem? And then product, and then go to market, right? So there's a norm kind of path that you can lay where you say, okay, starting from team risk, product risk, go to market risk, and then starting to create a plan how you can de-risk those things. And that normally is tied to the fundraising milestones, or should be. If you can tell that story, that's already a very compelling story to an investor, because you have a very clear idea how you building this company, right? So you're saying, now we are angel round. From angel to pre-seed, I'm de-risking, I'm building the founding team. Okay, from pre-seed to seed, I'm trying to focus on creating product market fit, right? With these kind of metrics, right? And then from seed to Series A, I'm focusing on the go-to-market notion and how can we build something that's repeatable and scalable to acquire users. Amazing, right? What that means in detail and double-clicking on this business, no idea. But so there is no clear, don't do this, but to have a clear idea of what actually do you need to prove. So often when I work with founding teams and see the pitch decks, I'm like, okay, but it's really not clear what you proved, right? And how did you do that? So within those milestones, what the kind of mental model I like is to think about everything as experiments. Right? To say, okay, because often founding teams are scared to make a bet on something, right? Because they say, if that doesn't work, then I cannot raise the round, right? If I build this MVP this way, then it hasn't worked, or this go-to-market if sales doesn't work, what do I do?
I think part of that fear also, though, comes from, because then you have to report that it didn't work. And I think a lot of founders are scared of, okay, if I say that it didn't work, now they're going to lose faith in me. Is that...
100%. And then they're kind of buying time and doing a lot of things, right? To avoid this decision and this bet. I'm now testing that. And I think testing is already the word, experiment and testing. So I think within those milestones, you need to define a testing strategy and define experiments, how you will do that, right? So I don't know, and go to market. What are great channels? Do we do sales? Do we do marketing-led? Do we do product-led? If we do sales-led, what's a great way to do that? So you have different hypotheses, different experiments. And if you also communicate it this way to your investors, so you say, okay, we tested 3 things, right? We tested social, we tested ads, we tested sales-led. These 2 didn't work, but here we have clear signs that this is something that will work. Amazing, right? So that's even more relevant than to say we just tested one, it worked, right? Okay, but is that the best one? Will others work better than that, and so forth? And again, it's, I think, a lot about the storytelling aspect, much undervalued skill of a founder.
Yeah.
To tell your story, what are you actually doing and how are you building this business? Yeah. And if you think about everything you're doing in the early stage as experiments and your job being to create a testing strategy, then you cannot fail. By definition, experiments fail, right?
Exactly.
That's what you're doing. And I think that helps a lot.
That's a really interesting way to think about it, because I think I've always thought of the pitch deck as a very standard structure. You've got your problem, you've got your opportunity, what's your solution, so your value proposition. And because of that structure and that mindset that I've had around it, I think it's very much like I would always put it in like a very, like there's no creativity or me explaining there's an experiment. It's more like I saw this, there's that, and therefore I gave you this. But what you're saying a little bit sounds more like also put in the routes to which you got to that, to explain it to the audience a little bit more, or who you're pitching to. And I mean, for example, what I did Unea in very early days is what was not clear what our pricing strategy will be. So I just showed 3 or 4 different options we will test, right? So I said, we could do subscription, we could do this and this, we could do take rate, and we'll need to test those. So we have an idea how we want to monetize, but we do not know today what will be the correct pricing strategy. So we will need to test that and prove it to the next round, right? So that was, for example, something we clearly communicated, that we do not know how this is going to work, or we have no data points so far, because we focus on other parts of the business, how we're going to solve for that. Right? Well, what I really love about that is you owned up to the fact that you don't know. Because I think, I mean, even for myself, I know when I've dabbled in the past of trying to start something or just out of curiosity looking into it, you feel like you have to have all the answers. And it felt a bit uncomfortable because I was like, I genuinely don't know. And it gets to a point where you're like, okay, how many times can I say I don't know before this starts to make me look really bad?
But this actually, I think that's exactly the same kind of point, right? So saying you don't know, but that's the way I'm going to find out. That's your testing strategy, right? So you have different hypotheses. You will conduct experiments. You have a testing strategy to find out what the best pricing strategy will be, what the best user acquisition channel will be, right? And that's normal. That's what you actually do on your day-to-day. You test LinkedIn versus Instagram and all of the different things, but you don't structure it this way, right? You don't really structure it as a testing strategy to identify what's your best customer acquisition channel, right? So I think, and that is one of the biggest mistakes. So you're really afraid to do something, right?
1,000%.
And I think that helps a lot, right? To
for
think
sure.
about it this way.
For sure. I like thinking about it that way, because it's more so like, okay, so long as I can tell you I've got a plan and this is how I'm going to try to do it, I don't have to have all the answers, but it's more so, even just talking to you about it, it feels more relieving. You know, it's like, okay, I don't have to have the answers. We're going to figure this out. There's a plan of action. Let's see what happens.
And it gives you focus, right? So you need to, you know what you need to build, what you need to focus on. And also what kind of direction. So if you start in the pre-seed and you claim you have figured out the customer acquisition point, that's really like with this MVP or prototype. So that's something an investor also will just see and identify when talking to you. Do you actually know what you're doing, right? And
I was gonna say, do investors see right through that when they see right through it? Okay.
I think so. Because I mean that's their job, right? Day in, day out, they just talk to teams. Hundreds of teams, right?
That's very true.
So, and they have seen all of the different problems. So for them, it's a playbook, right? So they know all of that stuff. And I think that's fine.
Funny enough, it actually makes me wonder, because oftentimes you don't really usually see people leave from investing and become founders. Like usually that switch doesn't really happen. But I'm like, well, if they've got the playbook and they understand it really well, wouldn't they?
It doesn't mean they're the best operators to actually execute on it, right? And they have the passion for a specific brown paper. Often if I see friends from VCs, if they're thinking about starting something, what I mentioned before, what my mistake is kind of spontaneous, okay, let's do this. They do very, again, strategically. They test different ideas. They talk to a lot of people. Is that something that I should pursue? Is that another idea? Also, third time founders do, right? They do not go to an investor or other founders with one idea, normally they have 2-3 ideas.
Okay.
Right? And okay, what do you think about this one or this one? I'm now thinking about, I can think about this one, but also this idea. And again, much more focused on, can I build a successful business out of that?
Hey there, just popping in quickly to ask, what do you think so far? Feel free to share what you think by leaving a comment or review. And before we move into the next part where Richy and I discuss cold outreach, particularly how he secured his largest investor via LinkedIn message, I'd like to ask you, would you mind liking, following, and or sharing this podcast with others? Keeping my fingers crossed that that's a yes, because honestly, it would mean the world to me. So thank you in advance, and back to the episode. Actually, going back to, because I mean, one of the points that you really honed in was talking to people really early on when you just have an idea. And this maybe, I mean, obviously I don't have that much experience. I don't have much experience in this, but I always had the impression, and I'm sure a lot of people did, when you go to an investor, you have to have everything more or less together and have one idea that you're going for. And I think it was interesting because you just said, go with 2-3 ideas and bounce back. First of all, how does one even just find the investors just to chat with about these topics? And also when you're going into this conversation, there should be a bit of preparation. So what do you normally go into those conversations with?
So obviously it's easier if you have a network of investors that you can tap into, or just like, it doesn't need to be investors, honestly, at the beginning, also other founders, right? That can help you. Maybe not also first time founders, but maybe someone in a network, a bit more experience, or are from that space, right? That can give you feedback on the different ideas. And again, not just give you feedback, what do you think about the idea, but why do you think that will not work, right? Where do you see the problems with this idea? And then you can come back and kind of, okay, can I solve that? Yes or no? So I think there are multiple ways. It doesn't need to be investors to do that, to identify what's a great business model out of the ideas you have. But to the point, talking to investors, I mean, I think it's a lot easier to talk to angels, because that's more their business, right? They want to get to know founders very early on, pre-idea often. Sometimes they give you blank check where they say, I just like you, whatever you do, I'm gonna invest. That also happens, right? So that's something angels do a lot. VCs, it's a bit harder because obviously they don't have the time to meet you for coffee 1 hour and talk about what would be great. But it's possible. They're doing this, right? They're doing this all the time, right? And they also help you to find, if they really like you or really like the idea, they will also maybe help you to find a co-founder that has the same, or is in the same stage, is currently looking for something and so forth. So that's what VCs also do a lot. But it's more challenging. But if you start from founders, fellow founders, business angels, they can introduce you to VCs or very early stage funds, micro funds. And they say, okay, that is more likely they will sit down with you, have an intro from them. Again, intro networking.
It's incredibly important. So. And I think because I get it, and I mean, I've seen how like one can figure out how to get into it, but if someone's starting from complete zero, right? Even angel networks are not that easy to find out about. You have to know someone who knows someone, right? So even just at the foundation, like what would you say are the best resources or the best ways for one to build a network in the early
Investor
stages?
network?
Investor, angel, founder network, just really kind of build a network within the entrepreneurial community.
To the point, right? So 80-20, what to focus on. The question is, do you really need that? And when do you need that, right? So if you're in a stage, you have different ideas and you want to validate them, it's not your job to kind of build a network and go on a lot of events and so forth, but to identify the right people that can give you valuable feedback, right? And you can, I get a lot of cold outreach of like from founders on LinkedIn. Saying, hey, you worked in this space. I have a question. Can we jump on a 5-minute, 10-minute call? Often I do that. I say, sure. I'm interested. I'm curious, right? So I think people also underestimate how likely and willing people are to give feedback, right?
Yeah.
And share their experience and learnings.
You're the third person to say this on this podcast. So I think that's really great. Yeah, I hope this like really hones in on people.
Yeah,
like, do not be scared to do cold outreach. It's okay.
Oh yeah, and also cold outreach to investors.
Yeah.
I think my largest angel investor, I cold emailed on LinkedIn.
Wild.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because I identified, again, you meant research, homework. I saw that this person, he's a very active business angel, but I had no ties to him. He's not in Berlin. And I saw that he invested in 2 businesses that are similar. So I just messaged him. We had 2 calls and then he invested.
Sick.
Yeah.
Okay, wild. And what would you say convinced him? Or how do you go into these calls?
Yeah. So again, it's what stage are you in, right?
Yeah.
So in this case, there was nothing. There was just PowerPoint. So it was founder market fit.
Okay.
Right? So are you the right founder? Are you the right founding team to solve this problem? What unfair advantage do you have to all the other teams in the world, right? And in my case, for Unea, I was building a solution based on the pain points from working on something for 8 years, right? So that was very compelling to investors. Say, okay, you have obviously industry knowledge about the pain points. You have access to the decision makers and so forth. So you know what you're doing, you know the pain point, check, right? Compared to a team that just starts something and doesn't know if that's actually a problem to anyone, if there are customers out there that are willing to pay. So that, in this case, was easier, but founder market fit is something you anyway need.
Okay. I was going to ask how critical.
Yeah, it's super critical, right? So why are you uniquely positioned to solve that, right? There needs to be some answer to that, right? And if another team gets 5 million the next day, why wouldn't they build a better company? And I think that's super critical in the very, very early stages, right? So pre-everything, pre-revenue, pre-product. If you want to talk to investors so early, right? They're also, it's fine if you say, okay, I want to kind of bootstrap for a time and build, fine, right? But if you say it's a bit more complex software product and we need just capital to start, and you need this external investors to invest in you, then you want to start talking to them as early as possible, right? And then I think it's all about founding team and founder market fit. And if you can show that, then I think it's comparable easy to do that.
And that leads into the question I have around FOMO, because everyone's always talking about, you've got to create FOMO. You really have to create that. How critical is FOMO really? And is it also something that is true, actually, at the end of the day?
So there are 2 points to that. One point, fundraising success is just a symptom, right? So as mentioned, very early days, it's a symptom of you having found a market fit.
Yeah, okay.
Right? If you don't have it and no one is believing you that you can actually build this, you will not fundraise. It's not because your fundraising is bad. Yeah, that's kind of pointless. Yeah, you don't tell a compelling story, or your story is simply not compelling. Yeah, no one will give you money, and having no success in fundraising is a symptom of that.
Okay.
Yeah, in the seed round, if you don't have product market fit, your fundraising will not work, right? And so forth and so forth and so forth, right? Or you cannot show a clear way to product market fit, right? So how you want to communicate, but the fundraising is just a symptom. I think that also helps a lot of founders not to kind of obsess about fundraising and create all the pitch deck and data rooms for ages, which is helpful, but it's just helpful, right? So I think that's super important to think about fundraising as a symptom, right, of your success. If you're building something successful, you will get the money. Yeah.
Okay.
But yes, FOMO is real, 100%. Right? Yeah. So, and also we engineered a lot of FOMO in the beginning. So you can, if you raising a seed round or Series A, or put it differently. So how I look at getting investors on board is to say, how can the investors actually help me for the next round of fundraising?
Okay.
Yeah, so if I have the angels on board, the angels should intro me to VCs for my seed round. These early stage VCs from a seed round should intro me and help me fundraising for the later stage Series A funds, and so forth, right? So because a VC is, as you mentioned, not an operator, right? So you shouldn't expect also too much from a VC or an investor. It's not their job to build the business, right? Otherwise they would do it.
Yeah.
So yes, they will be on calls with you and give you input, but no, it's you building this, right? So yeah, it's helpful to have expertise and so forth, but it's always not on the degree and level you wish the investor would be involved, right? So if you get investors in that will actually help you for the next round, you can also kind of manage them, and that's actually what they want to do, because I mean it's their incentive that you will raise a successful next round. So to tell them, hey, you are an investor in this fund, or you know this partner from this fund, I have a call with them tomorrow, could you write them in WhatsApp? And do that with another investor from your cap table, writing the same person. That's great, because that's the one call he has next day or she has, where this person received 2 WhatsApp messages from an investor. Hey, you have a call with this team. That's amazing. Cool. I'm also invested. And the other calls, this person doesn't have that, right? So that's just like, okay, there's something.
It's like, how do you manufacture that?
How there's something apparently happening, right? And then, I mean, VCs and investors is like, it's in their interest to talk to each other, right? They know you're not only talking to them. So as I mentioned, what you should do as a founder to talk to a lot of people and get feedback, they're doing the same, right? They're asking other funds, what do you think about that? Would you also invest in them, right? And so forth. And share deals, maybe co-invest. I mean, a small number of VCs, so obviously, they all know each other.
That's true.
So you need to manage this, right? Anyway, and managing this can create FOMO, right? If you're actively managing the fundraising process, knowing that they will talk to each other, leveraging your existing investors to help you raise a round with intros, with behind the scenes communication and so forth. So I think these are all things that will help you in creating a successful round and closing a VC. And again, for them, it's another data point. And they say, okay, these people invested. I hear from this other fund that they're also talking to them. So maybe I have another look. So maybe there's something I haven't saw, right? So that helps you. Again, if there are hundreds and thousands of pitch decks I look at.
It does help to filter.
It's very helpful. And again, it's they're in a business of de-risking, managing their funds. So they want to invest in something where they see a high likelihood of success. And that's a strong data point if other investors also think that's a great idea.
Most definitely. I think you've dropped a ton of knowledge over the last 40 minutes in our conversation. And since we're rounding out the conversation now, what I wanted to ask is there any last few nuggets or one piece of advice that you want to leave this conversation with or impose on the audience?
True. A lot of points. I hope that was helpful.
No, very helpful.
I think the number one advice, especially for early stage founders, first time founders, is this kind of really challenge your idea, and the business model. Is that really working? One question I always ask founders at very early: do you actually know what you need how many customers you need to generate 1 million in revenue? And 90% of cases not. They have no idea. And if they do the calculation roughly, they realize, actually, that's not a great business model, right? I need a lot of customers. That's a shitty pricing model. That's a shitty business model. And it's just 1 million, right? If you have a team of 10, that's how do you sustain it? So
that's a great question.
To have this, and I think a couple of kind of qualifying questions to identify this vitamin painkiller comparison I also like, right? So is that actually a vitamin, as people say, it's nice to have, it's a cool idea, or it's a painkiller to someone, right? That helps. So there are various ways to test, is that a great idea? Is that a great business model? And just to also be true to yourself with this $1 million question, which is, again, not a lot of money.
Yeah.
If you want to build a business, right, a venture-backed business.
Yeah.
But to have an idea for yourself where you say, okay, you need a lot of customers. How do you actually acquire them, to think about it and really challenge yourself, because the day will come where you need to answer those questions. So you better answer them prior to dedicating 100% of your time, love, everything to this venture, and de-risk for yourself as many points as possible. I think that would help a lot of founders.
Amazing. I love that advice, and that's such a great question, I think, for everyone to keep in mind. I know for me, even just a basic unit economic model, it makes it very quick for me to figure out, this business model works, or it's not going to get us to the goal that we need. So love that you're leaving that advice, and thank you so much for all of the insights and everything. Really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.
And there you have it, risers and thrivers. Richy dropped a ton of knowledge that will undoubtedly help you as an early stage founder or aspiring one avoid rookie mistakes. So, what did you find to be the most helpful tip or advice? Feel free to share your thoughts by leaving a comment or review. Also, I'd really appreciate it if you would take 1 minute to like, follow, and or share this podcast with others. With that being said, thank you once again for tuning in. And as always, onwards and upwards, y'all, and speak to you soon.